when there's an NFT that everyone is minting, you have a social component. So we started to see a lot of social activity on chain, while at the same time we saw a lot of challenges in the traditional social networking space, and came up with a lot of ideas actually how we could use something like the blockchain to solve some of these challenges, but at the same time making blockchain more social. So it's a stack for the end users, but also it's a stack for developers to build social media experiences with Web3 technology.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad from Fourth Revolution Capital, and I'm joined here by my co-host from 4RC Nomadic. Today, we're talking with the legendary DeFi founder, Stani Kulechov. He is one of the earliest builders in DeFi, going back to what was once called ETH-LEND, but now today is fondly known as Aave. Aave is the most popular dApp in DeFi. It is a place where you can lend tokens and you can borrow against your deposited collateral. Beginning in 2021, Stani made the bold move of jumpstarting another wildly challenging Web3 startup that would ultimately provide a self-sovereign alternative to social media called Lens. Lens is a decentralized composable social layer. You can think of it as not your keys, not your follower graph, and it has proven to be the most foundational Lego in the decentralized social stack, especially in jumpstarting a Web3 alternative to something like Twitter or Instagram. Today, Lens commands the most engaged Web3 social community with 117,000 unique users. It's something I post on daily, and it's also where we post all of our Edge podcast videos and clips called Lens Tube Bytes. So we're here today to talk about the recently announced scaling solution, which is called Momoka. It is intended to help scale decentralized social for a mass consumer adoption base. Okay, so before we get started, just a quick word from our sponsors who make the Edge podcast possible.
Introducing MANTLE. MANTLE is the first modular Layer 2 solution built for hyperscale dApps. We separate execution, data availability, and transaction finality into separate layers. This allows us to increase transaction throughput while keeping fees low and maintaining the security and decentralized nature of Ethereum. Join us in building on Mantle testnet today and be a part of the future of Web3.
Whether you're a trader, farmer, analyst, or newbie, you can trade smart with KYBERSWAP, the OG decentralized exchange and aggregator on 13 chains. Swap at the best rates, farm with real yields, set limit orders, use their proprietary trading and AI tools with the best UX in DeFi, securely and permissionlessly. Get better rates, better opportunities, better alpha, and a better trading experience. Trade smart now at KYBERSWAP.com. GTRADE by Gains Network is a decentralized leveraged trading platform, allowing users to synthetically trade crypto, forex, stocks, and commodities with up to 1000x leverage. GTRADE is live on both Polygon and Arbitrum, with over 30 billion in all-time trading volume and nearly 50 million in vault liquidity. The platform has consistently been among the top earning protocols, with 7-figure monthly revenue and a net deflationary token. GTRADE has become an on-chain staple for both traders and yield seekers. Check them out at gains.trade or by searching Gains Network on Twitter. The future of Web3 is bright, but crypto startups, DAOs, and on-chain organizations can't scale without tooling to power world-class financial and payment operations. Introducing UTOPIA, your all-in-one platform to create, execute, and understand your Gnosis-safe transactions. Execute payroll 10x faster through automated payment plans. Coordinate reimbursements and accounts payable through payment requests. Execute multi-sig transactions faster with your global team through signing links. View, label, and categorize all of your safe transactions in one place. Start managing your on-chain payments today by going to utopialabs.com. To get started with gasless payments, message Utopia's co-founder on Twitter at 0xkaito.
It all started so simply with CryptoKitties and Maker on Ethereum, but quickly became complex with more applications and many chains. Today, everyone agrees UX issues are the biggest blocker standing in the way of crypto adoption. Introducing AVOCADO. Multi-chain UX redesigned from the ground up. The first wallet to abstract networks, accounts, and gas. One gas tank to pay transaction fees on all chains. In USDC. and native access to INSTADAPP's powerful, custom DeFi strategies. AVOCADO, one wallet to rule all chains.
Given how well-known Stani is and what I've already shared about his background, we're just going to hop right into it so we can really maximize our time here and learn about Momoka. So on that note, Stani, welcome to the Edge podcast. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me at DeFi Dad, and thanks for the incredible introduction. I've probably never been introduced so well in my life.
Yeah, it's funny. Normally, especially with the new DeFi founders or new Web3 builders, it's so important, right? To kind of give that background. Like everybody wants to know, like, who is this person? Where do they come from? But I was kind of laughing as I was trying to come up with like a background for you, because I'm like, does anybody really not know who Stani is at this point? I mean, it's like we got Aave, we got Lens, and we got all sorts of other projects that you have some hand in. So why don't we go ahead and just talk a bit about Lens to kick off, in case someone is new to Lens and they're discovering this alternative to Web2 social media. I guess, like, what is the motivation for having set out to build Lens? Like, what are some of the problems that you're addressing with it? And then also, too, if you could remind us, how does Lens relate to Aave?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a unique problem to solve in the Web3 ecosystem. I think what we've been doing at Aave since the beginning, we've been focusing kind of on the element that, now that we have a programmable infrastructure, the Ethereum virtual machine, so you could actually create interesting programmable finance. And that was quite interesting because we were able to build a protocol, the Aave protocol, that provides ability to get yield on your cryptographic assets without giving custody, the keys of your holdings, and while maintaining a lot of transparency and execution that you really don't need to trust to change that easily. Basically guaranteed by smart contracts, a formal governance process with the Aave DAO. And somehow, like, my favorite part about the Aave protocol itself and things that we're building is that I've been always intrigued by the idea of how blockchain can actually build accessible technology and opportunities. With Aave protocol, it really works the same way for every single user that you might have, regardless what is the background of the user, what part of the world they're transacting. And this is important for me because I've grew up over the internet, and for me, I realized kind of like how much being able to access to information, knowledge, and connections over the internet helped me through my life, because I come from a more smaller country, from Finland, from the Nordics, and it's been giving me a lot of access to information. So with DeFi, we've increased access to financial opportunity. And after, I think, Aave, I think it was roughly 2 years ago, and the protocol has definitely been a successful part of our work, and now managed in a very decentralized way by the Aave community while we're still contributing. But we saw another big kind of like a challenge is that there's a lot of social actions on chain. So if you think about DeFi, that's a social behavior. So in most cases, when people are participating into various different pools, they do it because some other people are doing as well. So there's a social behavior. When there's an NFT that everyone is minting, you have a social component. So we started to see a lot of social activity on chain, while at the same time we saw a lot of challenges in the traditional social networking space, and came up with a lot of ideas actually how we could use something like the blockchain to solve some of these challenges, but at the same time making blockchain more social. So how we can actually create a social layer for the whole Web3. So that kickstarted the Lens project, and we basically took a lot of the social networking artifacts. So I call them artifacts because they're just not only features, but behavior that we do online that is kind of like a repeated, and a behavior that we also do offline, such as creating connections, connecting with people, creating a profile, so basically your appearance, and then distributing content, sharing content, and we put those things into different kinds of protocol guarantees. So Lens is quite interesting because it's not only a smart contract based protocol, but there's a heavy infrastructure there that provides those different guarantees, that the same way as you hold your assets, whether that is crypto, you can hold your profile and have the ownership and the follower base. But there is also a significant kind of like an off-chain infrastructure, and also kind of like a hybrid in between that we will be talking today about the Momoka. So it's a stack for the end users, but also it's a stack for developers to build social media experiences with Web3 technology.
Stani, I love that answer. I love kind of like the organic nature that you arrived at building Lens, just through kind of like your workings and learnings with DeFi and the NFT space. So to kind of get into Lens, I believe last time I checked, there's around 117,000 Lens handles. And my understanding is the Lens team has been limiting access to users currently due to some scaling challenges. Is that fair to say?
Well, the way we actually went by launching the protocol, so something that is very fascinating, that it's almost a year since the version 1 of the protocol was launched in the Polygon mainnet. So it's kind of like an interesting time for the team and the early users, but we've launched it as a more of a experimental beta protocol. So we knew that there is sort of infrastructure that we have to build to scale beyond, let's say, even to scale the maximum that we could within the Web3 communities that we have in the ecosystem now, but also beyond that, to scale to users that might not have used ever Web3, never had an Ethereum address or any other, haven't had any crypto even in their wallet. So we knew that there's going to be a lot of infrastructural work beyond the smart contract itself. So what we did in the very early, we actually created a manifesto where you basically, if you liked what we were manifesting about Web3 social, you could actually sign that manifest with your wallet and confirm with your Twitter account. And effectively, you ended up into a list where you will be able to claim a handle. And then we have different kinds of ways of actually looking into what are active communities on Web3, and using that Web3 footprint that comes of holding a particular NFT or participating in a particular DAO, and whitelisting those addresses to claim the profile. So trying to do it in a very kind of like a wide open way without fully going in full blast onboarding every single users that we can in this early stage. And we've noticed that we're in a kind of like a tipping point where we have over 100,000 profiles minted, but it's not really a metric that we really follow that much. I think like for us, we more are looking into the kind of like a economical metric of how people are using Lens, what kind of content they might be collecting, what kind of interactions and engagements are important for them, and trying to build towards that direction where we're able to serve that on a scale. So there is definitely like a good amount of profiles minted, but it's definitely not our main metric. And also because it's quite tiny compared to more broader social media. We're really in the very kind of like I think the 1 year anniversary tells it all. We're still a very young protocol in that sense. So you can imagine having a kid that is 1 year old, and how much involvement there will be at that level from going on.
You tweeted out quite a while ago, but yeah, congrats. Everyone I think is aware, based on that cheeky little tweet of yours, that you must have your first baby on the way. So we're all excited for that, but grateful for the baby that is Lens and Aave as well. So
many babies.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Before we talk more specifically about some of the scaling challenges and then how Momoka might solve for that, I also wanted to just remind folks, like, how do you think about Lens competing with legacy social media? Or does it even have to? Because I think the default assumption for folks who do learn about Lens is, oh, this thing means to displace it. This thing has to beat Twitter and Instagram and Facebook in order for it to quote unquote win. And my understanding is your vision is, very different from this. So how do you think about being an alternative versus actually becoming like a replacement to legacy social media?
Yeah, I would say that there's been a lot of kind of discussions of how maybe the social media landscape today, how it's built online, isn't necessarily best way of serving the internet users, let's say. But something we forget quite easily is that those big social media platforms actually made it easier to share ideas. So anyone can go with any of the social media platforms, and you can share a lot of ideas, sort of content. You might get followers, and in some of these platforms, not all of them, but some will even share revenue with you. So like the actual landscape for social isn't that bad. But then when we think about what it could be, like how much better it could be, I think there's kind of like where Lens comes into play, because we kind of are trying to change a bit the dynamics and the mindset of how social could be built in the future, and especially providing certain type of guarantees from the Lens protocol that establish ownership of your profile, the followers that you might have, your audience, and just changing the dynamics where the users aren't just visitors of a platform, but actually whatever they create, whatever social capital they are forming, distributing, and connections they're making, they actually follow them everywhere they go. So it's more self-sovereign social media. And what it does then is that you kind of have this effect where you go from one social media application to another on Lens, and you have everything you basically own intact. And it changes the relationship between users and the platforms, clients, and even the protocol, how we build this future of social, because we kind of can ask more from the platforms, the clients, and even as a group of users from the protocol, what we users need and what we want to own. And that means that it creates more engagement of actually building just better innovation on social. So just to give you one example is that on Lens, all the data is publicly available, so anyone can compute on that data. So you can compute more fair algorithm, maybe an algorithm that favors small podcasters across the whole protocol, favors more small artists, and has a better discovery there, has some sort of interesting mechanism of social proofing. Maybe it helps you to find smaller artists that your peers and their peers might be excited about. So like it creates a lot of choice and flexibility for the users. So like the way we see it, there's a lot of challenges in social media, and we're trying to just provide more flexibility and choice for the users. The users should be able to choose choose experiences, choose algorithms, and then choose their monetization. They should choose whether they should be able to earn on a piece of a content that they create, and who they want to earn with, and share that benefit as well.
Stani, just as a quick aside, I kind of explained this idea of the social graph to my 71-year-old father, who's very slow to adopt technology. And I said, yeah, what if you could just take all your data and identity on a social platform from Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and everything you built up kind of free flow to the other platform? He's like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. So he immediately got the value prop. Somebody who just got on email, I think 5 years ago. So I think there's something here.
Somehow, I think Web3 social might be a case where we're actually able to reach more users into the space, because effectively there's less of financial component necessarily involved, meaning that we might be able to build better tools to onboard new user groups. And I like the fact that everything is happening on the same network. So that means that you can build relatively quickly an application or an experience, and then you can provide that access to an existing user base. It's kind of the same way if you think about like Ethereum, for example. Like you want to create something on Ethereum, and if you have an address, you're able to, let's say, mint an NFT, or maybe buy an asset from a decentralized exchange. So basically with Web3 social, it's basically just extending that to any user-generated content or any relationship you want to create from one person in the space with another one. And I think a lot of the things can actually be abstracted away quite easily. So you might be able to interact with Lens protocol without actually needing to understand what's the cryptography or the blockchain-based guarantees behind the scenes, or you might just need an email or a phone number in the future. And I think that's going to be a game changer, because if we are able to onboard new demographics, that is what creates more economy for Web3.
Yep. Maybe before we dive further into Momoka, one of the kind of interesting parts of Lens as compared to, I guess, some of these other decentralized social platforms like Farcaster and Nostr is that you've kind of made the tougher initial design decision to put all the transactions on chain. Maybe speak to that decision of choosing that, what I would say is maybe the harder path from the outset.
Well, actually, it was quite easy path, because what Lens does, it's basically allows you that guarantee, but as a application builder, you can still choose not to put transactions on chain. And also there's the most typical example how clients are actually building on Lens is that they're creating on-chain transactions, for example, but the content itself is just pointed with a linking to data availability layer or something like IPFS or Arviv, or it could go directly to a S3 cloud. So basically you can add privacy layers and whatnot. So what the protocol actually does, it just says that you have a tool set of all these guarantees. It's up to you to choose whatever use case you have, and you need to support your application. And that's why I always talk about like the artifacts of social networking and what of those things that you actually need. And it's actually been interesting because it's creating transactions on chain solves the data availability aspect, which is especially important if you have content that you want to be somehow tokenized, and you can make an asset out of it, which is very important for creators, for example. That might be music NFTs. That might be clips of a podcast, memorable events like this. It could be a movie. It can be also token gated, which is something that is supported through LIT protocol across the Lens ecosystem. So it also means that it might be an access to something through token gating as well. And this was the main way of creating content on Lens. And obviously then Momoka changed quite everything, because we decided that to scale the protocol, there's a big benefit out of on-chain transactions, but you need also transactions where you don't need that on-chain component, but you might want to have the data availability. So basically kind of like a compromise in between what we have and expanding that tech stack.
Meet STADER Labs, a non-custodial multi-chain liquid staking platform. With over 40,000 users across 6 chains, STADER is just about to launch ETH-BACKED, a decentralized liquid staking token on Ethereum. Backed by some of the biggest names in crypto, their multiple audits with top security firms, bug bounties, and real-time monitoring are a testimony to their emphasis on security and safety. With a unique multi-pool architecture and tokenomics, ETH-X empowers stakers everywhere to run a node with as little as 4 ETH and earn 35% more than solo stakers. Sign up for their ETH-X Alpha today and be the first to know about $1 million in staker rewards. Ethereum is fully decentralized, and LIQUITY is a shining example of decentralization. LIQUITY is a non-upgradable protocol where users can deposit their ETH and take out a loan interest-free. Users get their loans in LUSD, an unstoppable Ethereum native stablecoin that is solely backed by Ether. You can use LIQUITY to buy real-world assets or to earn yield across 20-plus places in DeFi. More risk-tolerant users can also use the protocol to lever up on their ETH. With over 750 million worth of ETH locked into LIQUITY's unstoppable contracts, get access to real DeFi. DeFi that's immutable, capital efficient, and fully decentralized. Learn more at liquity.org. All right, so let's get to, I think the reason all of us are here. I really want to get into Momoka as this scaling solution for Lens. A few weeks back, we saw a tweet come out introducing, at the time it was called Bonsai, but since then the name has been changed to Momoka.
We choose a name that was already, there was a scaling solution to that. That was actually quite unfortunate, but at the same time, like, we basically admitted that we made a mistake. We name it to something that already existed.
It's a great name. Yeah. To their credit, it's a great name. But
I like their project. It's more ZK based scaling, so it doesn't have any linkage or any similarities in the tech stack. But it was actually funny because we were asking then the community members, well, what we should name actually then. What could be the new name for Bonsai, and then back and forth we went, and Momoka was something that people really liked a lot, and I'm quite happy because it means a tree type in Japanese, and it's part of the whole kind of like a garden, digital garden landscape that we have in our branding as well.
In this tweet thread, you start to lay out the plans or the blueprint for scaling Lens. You describe Momoka as an optimistic L3 scaling solution that will process transactions at hyperscale and is designed to support the next generation of Web3 social users. So yeah, can you help break that down for our audience?
Yeah, in its simplicity, if you look what we actually can do on the blockchain side. So the biggest challenge about Web3 social, or let's say blockchain-based social, or whatever that path is, even like the federated models, is that how do you deal with synchronization, but also in terms of blockchain, like how do you deal with the amount of data in the transaction that is happening, and how do you actually process that? So when it comes to any single blockchain, one of the challenging part is that you're always going to be limited by the block size, basically, and the block space. So how many transactions you can actually execute and create in one single block. And there's different kinds of limitations. For example, in Polygon, it's going to be with the POS, it's going to be under 100. Some blockchain might have more throughput. They might have bigger block size that allows to do that. But eventually, there's always kind of like a cap how much you can make. And this isn't really feasible. This is very good. Like using a blockchain is very good for profiles. It's very good for securing your audience. It's very good of tokenizing whatever you create, your creativity. That might be like music, audio, video, and also maybe sharing and anything to do with the monetization layer when you need to share revenue with other users, collect revenue. So those things are incredible good things to do with the blockchain, because that gives you the guarantees and the security, because blockchain is all about that security aspect. But then when you have actually transactions where you don't really need that, so let's say that you might want to data availability. So when you look at, for example, Mastodon, when it comes to data availability, Mastodon is federated model, right? So when you go into one server, if the host decides to put the server down, everyone loses their data. So whatever you created, shared, that might be gone. And data availability is for actually ensuring that that data still exists. So whatever your creations are. So the beautiful thing about data availability is that it works in a completely different way than a blockchain. So you can create massive amount of data and store on a data availability layer, which basically means that you're not limited to the block time or the block space of creating transactioning. You can actually transact as much as you want and create data as much as you want and periodically store it on a data availability layer, which is incredible, because that is the kind of scale you need if you take Web3 social from the content perspective into more wider adoption. And Momoka, what Momoka actually does, it uses those data availability layers, but it's basically a verification protocol for data scaling, or just data. We could put it in that simple way. So what Momoka allows you to do is run a submitter or a verifier. So submitter is someone who submits data in particular form. And verifiers are the ones that actually look into the data that is submitted into these data availability layers, that it's in correct form and it has been executed in a correct way by the submitter. So if you think about it, the use case here is lens, posts, and comments, but actually you could apply this into anything where you need a massive scale for that data part. So it effectively is a data verification protocol. And down the line, what you can add also is that these data verifiers have to come up with a network agreement and agree as a kind of like a consensus that the data is correct. And you can add incentives models and slashing for the submitters. So it's basically an incredible tool of creating transactions without rolling them back into on-chain, putting into a data availability layer, but also having a way to verify that whatever we put there is correct, because we have a formal process for that, and there's multiple verifiers doing that. So it feels very complicated, but it's as simple as just taking a bunch of transactions, putting in the data availability layer, verifying them, and having a good process for that. That's as simple it is.
Awesome. So maybe just to reiterate a few things, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Stani, but it sounds like you still want to kind of use Polygon block space for creating a profile, and a lot of those like first foundational processes that kind of like, I guess, like lock in your identity on Lens. But then you're tapping into the data availability layer to dramatically scale a lot of the other actions that don't really need to use up that secure Polygon block space. Is that kind of correct? And then if you could just comment, like, are there any trade-offs you're making here for the scaling?
Yeah, there is basic in terms of the trade-offs. I think what you're doing here is actually you won't have a tokenized version of a content on chain, obviously when you're using Momoka. But then if the content becomes interesting, you can always pull it back to on chain. So for example, let's say if you create like 5 clips out of, we can actually do this as an experimentation. We could create 5 clips of the DeFi Dad this episode, and we can create them as Momoka transactions, and then let's say that some of them get enough likes. So what we can do, actually, we can take that transaction and convert it into on-chain asset that people can actually collect. It works a bit similar way as lazy minting. So if you think about the whole vision here, it's about using the blockchain in a more optimistic way, where we're saying that let the users and the community or the creators to decide what content is relevantly valuable for them to actually tokenize it and using the blockchain security, and what content is relevant for just having that data availability for them. And maybe also what kind of content maybe shouldn't use neither or, and just should be stored in a, let's say, Google Cloud. Because that flexibility is what is needed in Web3 social and even building social applications. And that's how it's different from, let's say, decentralized finance or financial transactions, because in finance, pretty much like you have to secure systems end to end, and you're using blockchain. And obviously with even layer 2s, you're periodically rolling the transactions back to Ethereum, for example. But in Web3 social, because of the amount of data, not all of the data by itself might be valuable on chain. It might be valuable for computation. That's why you need data availability as well, that everyone has that democratic access to compute and build algorithms and build better things for the users. So there is that flexibility in the stack now.
Stani, we've spent quite a bit of time here talking about Momoka as what we might call an L3. Could you just try to define that for folks who are new to that term? L2s have become really popular because they're being used in DeFi specifically to allow us to transact cheaper and be able to transact faster with a lot of the different DeFi applications like Aave. But yeah, how do you define an L3?
That's a good question, because we've been also thinking like what Momoka actually is. So we had a lot of ideas of what could be like the categorization and naming for that. And we do know that Momoka is a very optimistic way of thinking about how to build Web3 social and how to interact with the blockchain. Layer 3s usually mean that you're building something on top of a layer 2. Now we've been building Lens since the beginning on Polygon, which is technically it's a side chain, but they see kind of like themselves as a layer 2 scaling solution on the POS chain. So on that perspective, it could be layer 3. But also when you think about it, what Momoka does, it basically creates these blockchain transactions, but it doesn't really roll them back to layer 1. Neither it creates those transactions on Polygon either. It does simulate the transactions. And that's the kind of verification part where we are interested in whether those transactions are passing blockchain protocol-based rules like the Lens protocol smart contract rules, and then storing them on a data availability layer, which is in some ways also like L1s, because it's the kind of like a baseline bottom infrastructure. So like and layer, so either it's a layer 2 on data availability, but because we have this verification, data verification aspect into it, it's kind of like a hybrid model. So I think what we're leaning towards, it's some sort of data scaling solution, but we don't really have a perfect categorization for that. So I think when we see actually more similar solutions as Momoka, and I think there will be, because Momoka is very useful outside of Web3 social, for example, in gaming, where you want to have data availability. Just to give an example is that you might create significant amount of assets, but you don't want to apply tokenization on all of those assets, but you want to have data availability. You want to store them somewhere. So that's where Momoka type of solutions could work pretty well. And then you can tokenize where you actually need that. So let's say if the game goes down, let's say Fortnite stops supporting the game, all of the assets and all the configurations and everything might be still available, and the game can be continued. And you can still build games today that are just existing on IPFS. In fact, I created one. So that's another kind of use case. So we need more similar type of solutions, innovation to kind of like have more categorization. But also like it's something that I want to personally hear more community feedback, what actually is the right bucket for Momoka.
Awesome. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of kind of some of the other use cases that Momoka could be used for. And I guess that's all possible because the Lens team has decided to make Momoka open source. So really anybody can, come to it and play around with it and use it for, I guess, whatever they wish.
Yeah, I mean, Momoka as Lens protocol, as some of the clients, even like Lenser, Mocha as well, it's open source technology. Anyone can basically just fork it, change the verification component into whatever is their use case, whatever kind of transactioning data structures it needs to verify, and use it in their own application. We're actually currently writing a Rust client for Momoka as well, which is going to be faster. So that's something like I'm actually pretty excited how much we've been able to progress on the Momoka side within our team. So and if there's kind of like a feedback, we would love to talk to different teams about additional use cases and kind of like a help to think those through. But yeah, I personally think we should use Momoka elsewhere as well, because it's a very useful solution.
And another kind of recent announcement we saw on Twitter was the release of the Lens SDK 1.0. And in it, I think in part of the copy, it said just 10 lines of code. So like this coupled with Momoka, looks like things are ramping up for the Lens world. When do you kind of envision Lens coming out of the early access stage that it's been in and opening up to, I guess, more broader adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I personally hope that will happen during this year. It's definitely an optimistic timetable, but we've been able to ship very quickly a lot of the innovation that we have. And obviously that there's some crucial parts that we want to solve that before you can go into completely open permissionless access. But once that happens, it's just going to be a game changer, because it means that more people can come, not just create content, but actually realize how powerful Lens protocol is and what Web3 social could actually be capable of. And we'll see more things being built because there's more ideas floating around. And something I love about the Lens ecosystem is that all these ideas and feedback, they're usually floating in Lens, So you can actually like find a lot of discussions and jump in and see feedback, and you can ask feedback directly within the protocol itself. But our goal is to build for also a lot of not just the end users, but the developers that are building the next generation social, being as unopinionated as possible and as flexible as possible. So that's why that's one of our priorities, to figure out how to open more and more of that accessibility. But once that happens, like, I think it's going to be our biggest moment.
Stani, before we wrap up, can you share more about like how do you envision the future decentralization of the Lens protocol? We know this is really key to like realizing the fullest vision of Lens as a decentralized social layer. So how do you think about that?
No, I think it's a big part of why we're building Lens, is to think about how we, end of the day, decentralize the whole protocol further. So as with many protocols, they start with smaller teams executing, deploying, and then expanding and upgrading, improving the protocols. But down the line, as there is more proof that a protocol has utility and more users that are actually excited about what exists, you start to kind of like think a bit more of like, how do we make this more of a public good? And usually, like, I like the idea of progressive decentralization, where you go slowly because you can move very quickly. And actually, I'm very surprised how much actually things you need to ship in Web3 social, because the stack isn't only the protocol, but it's also like the middleware, being able to create some basic discovery mechanisms, basic support for, let's say, to have performance on images and audio and video. And like, there's actually a lot of components involved there. And it's not just only like the decentralized protocol aspect there. But I think it's something that happens on different steps. And first is obviously opening up the whole protocol for all usage, and then thinking how to get that community into decision making. So how we get people who are actively using and caring about the protocol, how they can come and actually contribute into decision making, which is quite great because it's already built in into the protocol. So you have profile-based voting that is possible, especially with the snapshot integrations, follow-based governance as well. So even you can ask your followers what's valuable for them regarding you as a user. So I think that there's built-in mechanism, but starting those feedback loops early is quite valuable. I think we're still early, but once there's actually a bigger access into the protocol, we can start to figure out different kinds of ways to involve the community and what kind of feedback loops could be created. The community is involved quite heavily in giving feedback across Lens, but also the developer community is very involved. So, for example, we have now our third metadata standard that is being created together with the community. So a lot of the clients they're basically messaging on GitHub and leaving comments about what kind of data structure there should be. Some might prefer better metadata for music, including like lyrics, and some might prefer some other type of data, metadata structures. So that's the standard itself is increasing. So I think it starts, it has already kind of like begun, but the more we go to wider user base, the more important it becomes. And the reason for that is that we don't really have all the answers. We've been learning quite a lot during the process, but we still don't have all the answers. And that's where the community plays a big role.
Well, Stani, before we let you go, I just want to remind listeners they should learn more about Lens by going to lens.xyz. Once they are onboarded to Lens in the future, they should follow you on Lens at Stani. So that's really easy. And then I want to give you the final word. Anything else, Stani, that you'd recommend for folks who want to get involved in Lens or follow your work and the work of the Lens and Aave team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Lens is also like fully read open, so you can already follow what's going on in Lens. If you're building on top of the Lens protocol, or you're a creator, you might create music or you publish a lot of content. We're able to give early access or add to a wait list. Just DM me wherever. On Twitter or other means. But yeah, we're super happy to actually see now after a year how much progress there has been, given that Lens was only launched as a protocol without any clients, and see how actually a lot of developers are building the infrastructure and experiences. And it's just like, it's fascinating to see like how much you can do when you build together.
Yeah, actually, one other thing I want to remind folks of, one of the secrets that finally got out is if you don't have a Lens profile yet, go to orb.ac or check out the Favor app. It's PHAVER. And then there's a few others here too I'm probably forgetting. You can start to use a mobile app, which is way more convenient to use on your phone. And you can start to, again, enjoy the Lens community and all of the different applications that are built on top of it. So personally, that's where I spend most of my time, is through the mobile apps. But Stani, anything else you want to share before we go?
No, that's all on my side. I mean, it was amazing to be here as usual, and hopefully I can collect this podcast later on LensTube.
That's right. Yeah. Make sure if you follow me at DeFi Dad on Lens, I post all of these podcast interviews for the Edge podcast there, and then we also post clips there as well. So I have put a very like minimal price to collect. Normally it's like 1 or 2 Matic, but that has been so helpful to me. While there can be a cost to uploading like bigger files, the types of files that we upload for like these video podcasts, and really appreciate just the Lens community has been very supportive of us. And for what it's worth, every bit of that Matic, I think I've spent every last Matic on uploading more videos. That's much appreciated. And the redirecting fee you mentioned, I always put in a 25% referral. So if someone reposts the videos that we upload, and if someone collects it, they get 25% of the Matic. So we're dog fooding everything Lens here on the Edge podcast.
That's so cool. And I've been trying to collect every episode that there is, and
we appreciate that. It's you and my mom, Stani. It's probably just you and my mom collecting all of them. So thanks, Mom. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're a talented builder like Stani, please consider reaching out to our team at fourthrevolution.capital. And for future episodes of the Edge podcast, please check out our link tree at edge_pod.